Alright, hello everyone, and thank you for tuning in once again to the Black Box Podcast, BBOR, Black Box Online Radio. Today we're still discussing the death of Lauren Agee, which is an incident that happened in 2015, and Lauren was a resident of Hendersonville, Tennessee, and she passed away at an event known as Wakefest, along with 3 other people who were in her party who have become suspects or witnesses or giant question marks in the whole scenario. Them being Aaron Lilly, Christopher Stout, and Hannah Palmer. This is going to be the 3rd upload in this kind of segment that I'm doing, and I'm going to flat out tell you that I don't have all the answers. I mean, if I did, then this would be a way different kind of broadcast. But one of the big things about this is, it's going to be one where we just do some devil's advocate, where I'm going to do one upload where I argue the likelihood that Lauren was murdered, and one of them will be the likelihood of whether or not Lauren will have died of an accidental death. And I've decided to do the accidental death one second, and this one is going to be about the likelihood that Lauren was murdered. And she was murdered by either Christopher Stout or Aaron Lilly. What is the single greatest thing that this hinges upon? Why would these 2 men want to murder Lauren? Well, the largest theory that people were going on is there was no rape kit, and they really believed that Lauren was sexually assaulted, and, the investigators didn't bother to follow it through. Okay, I mean, that's a giant red flag, and furthermore, that whole notion that there was a tampon inside her so they couldn't have performed the rape kit, that turned out to be totally false. So, we have this very large kind of possibility that something was going on with her, either Christopher Stout or Aaron Lilly. Not to mention that the location of where the body was found is highly unlikely that it got there normally. It's most likely that somebody at some point deliberately moved Lauren's body. If this were an accident, just come forward and say that your friend fell off a cliff and, get to a phone and call 911. If you have nothing to hide, why move the body? So one of the biggest things that are associated with that is Aaron Lilly. I always want to call him Dylan. I was about to say Dylan Lilly. I don't know why. That just name is always in my head. Aaron and Chris were seen hanging on a houseboat in a canoe. They're kind of like right by the edge of the houseboat with their canoe, and they were trying to get the attention of the people who were patrolling the area, and they were looking in the direction of Lauren's body, and they were almost certain that they could see Lauren. And the investigators were like, why are these guys looking there? And they began paddling over, and they're saying that we think you've spotted our friend, but they hadn't told them quite yet that Lauren was even sighted, so it's like, in the first upload, I made a mistake. I thought that it was Chris Stout and Hannah Palmer in the canoe, but in reality it was Chris Stout and Aaron Lilly. There was the 2 guys that were hanging by the houseboat with their canoe, and they paddled over to the patrollers, and they made comments about seeing the body in the water before the patrollers even said a word about it. That's weird. That's suspicious. And that sounds like people trying to get almost, trying to appear innocent from the beginning when they know more than they're leading on. Now, if we're going to go down that road, we have the weird behavior that was, exemplified by Aaron Lilly, trying to manipulate the conversations, trying to censor Chris Stout from talking to people asking questions. Once again, if you don't have anything to hide, why would you ever feel the need to censor him or to tell him not to say something? If this was just an accidental death, why not say something? Or even if at the very least, if this is some sort of accident and they did move the body, why not just admit to that as opposed to being viewed as a suspect for murder? This really looks like these two gentlemen, and they're not really gentlemen, these two people had something to do with her death. And I mean foul play. Some of the other things that point to the notion of this being a murder as opposed to anything else. The damage to Lauren's body is one of the biggest reasons, and that's really what Sheila Wysocki is going at on the Without Warning podcast, and some of the other interviews that she's appeared in. She appeared on Lord and Arts, and she appeared with Gray Hughes. These things are impossible to ignore. Lauren's nose was broken, but her feet were not torn up. So it's almost just like that's really pushing Sheila to believe that she, was beaten, and I repeat, beaten, not, off of cliff rocks, but beaten by a person, and she did not have this type of accidental fall. Also, no water in Lauren's lungs. She died from blunt force trauma, or possibly dry drowning could have been associated with that. Either way, though, Lauren received an enormous amount of trauma, and it's very difficult to account for a lot of the things put forth, just that she fell off a cliff. I mean, it's like, yes, her blood alcohol level was high, but, just the fact is, why wouldn't there be more damage to her feet if this were just an accident? Why wouldn't she be more torn up? Doesn't that rather suggest that somebody did something to her, and they brought the body down, and they brought the body into the second cove? I mean, I think most people in almost all parties are really going to the whole notion that Chris Stout and Aaron Lilly moved Lauren's body. I think that, that's just what people are kind of going, no matter what angle that you play with. But the issue is, unless if this is not a murder, what reason would they have to move her body? I mean, what on earth could that possibly be if they did not directly cause her death? And, it's like, by murder, we're also going to include things like manslaughter into that, whatever sort of, type of culpable homicide term you could imagine. I mean, we can let the lawyers sort out what that is, but this is mostly just to say that, to put forth an argument to try and understand some things. Did Chris Stout and Aaron Lilly cause her death? When we play the evidence out like this, it seems rather convincing that these two individuals somehow injured Lauren, and then they moved the body to the second cove, and then they staged this whole thing about waiting in a canoe by a houseboat, waiting for people to come out and find the body, so they could create this whole story, this fake, fictitious narrative. We also need to bear in mind that these are very unstable guys. It's like, Chris Stout is currently in jail for an unrelated DUI. Aaron Lilly was in a car accident and got paralyzed. It's just, tragedy cannot escape these people. And furthermore, why was Aaron Lilly posting on his Instagram, best weekend ever, 48 hours after the death of Lauren Agee? I mean, doesn't that come across as a little psychopathic? A little sociopathic and narcissistic? I mean, why on earth would he do that unless he's like a total sociopath or something? I mean, not in all seriousness, that's just asking for trouble. If one of your friends or the people that was in your party died and you were completely aware of it and you were there when they found the body and you're in a post-best weekend ever, you're asking for trouble. Even if you aren't a sociopath, that's just very insensitive and, in very poor taste. And once again, though, I said these are very destructive people. More importantly, Aaron Lilly is not cooperating with investigators. And why wouldn't he just cooperate from the beginning if he had nothing to hide? Unless he did something to Lauren that caused her death, It's like, what could be the possibility that, he's just really shy and doesn't want to talk? I mean, I just view that as something that is so improbable that it's just unlikely, because that's not what someone would do if they didn't have something to hide. Now, with the notion of Hannah Palmer, a lot of people really aren't looking to her as someone who would have carried out a physical activity. I would say that Hannah Palmer is someone who is most likely covering for her now husband, Aaron Lilly, and for Chris, just so she doesn't get implicated as an accessory, and also to protect her husband. Somebody brought up during the question and answer session with Gray Hughes and Sheila Wysocki that it's possible that if Aaron did commit a murder or a heinous crime against Lauren, that he could have married Hannah Palmer for the Fifth Amendment so she wouldn't be allowed to testify against her husband. And I was just like, well, that's only surmise, but it's like, that kind of makes sense. As far as we know, when people who have been researching this case, they were very surprised that those two got married, because they hadn't been a lot of build-up, or at least known to the public that they were planning to do that. That's not beyond belief, and that's not beyond the realm of possibility. But let's go back to some of the things associated with Chris Stout, who is currently in jail. I was just watching a channel called Dark Curiosity. I hope I've remembered the name, and they brought up one of the details that I had heard from the very beginning. Lauren is seen in a hammock with Chris Stout, but she had also made a comment to somebody at the bar that night that she was not interested in him in any way. And if I recall correctly, Lauren had a boyfriend who was not present on this trip. She had been seeing someone, so that would be a definite motivation for her not to want to do anything with Chris Stout. And from the first upload, I really thought that he was sort of the answer all, that he was kind of the key, that it was Chris that had done something to Lauren, and Aaron was helping him cover it up. But based on Aaron Lilly's dominant role, it really kind of gives you the opposite view. It really kind of gives you the sort of impression that it was Aaron that was, involved with this. But we know for the fact that these people were alone together, and Lauren ended up dead. And it's highly unlikely that this was anything related to Lauren's cliff jump, which did happen, actually. At first, I was skeptical that it happened because I was only listening to Lauren's mom, about saying, why wasn't there any media of this? But an independent witness did come forward and say, yes, Lauren did do a cliff jump, and I don't think she actually hit her head, though. All they said in the Gray Hughes interview was that she had the wind knocked out of her. So, well, that's not going to cause any brain bleed. That's not going to cause any sort of injury that would have affected her later. She didn't hit her head, so we know. To the best of our knowledge now, as people trying to figure this out on the internet. So when we have this nature, that really weakens the case that this was an accidental death, because a lot of people were saying from the beginning they just thought that Lauren hit her head, and then, that caused some sort of internal injury. Like somebody said, it could have started a slow brain bleed that someone wouldn't have known about, and then later that night she got disoriented and fell off the cliff. Well, they're more saying it like the independent witness is saying she had the wind knocked out of her. So let's recap real fast. Lauren is staying with a guy that she's not interested in. These guys were acting suspicious when her body was found. They were acting suspicious during the line of questioning. Lauren maybe did not, suffer any internal injuries. Lauren's feet were not torn up as they would have been if she had hit the rocks. And furthermore, this body could not have floated to the cove without being assisted by some force. Moreover, the rape kit was never conducted. And, Chris and Aaron are not cooperating with the authorities. That leads us to believe that this was an incident of foul play. That means that it believes that these two are guilty of some sort of culpable act against Lauren. Well, thank you everybody for listening to my sort of devil's advocate arguing in favor that Lauren was murdered by these two gentlemen. Why do I keep calling them that? These two jerks, how about that? Okay. Yeah, these two guys. That Lauren was murdered by Dylan. Who the fuck is Dylan? Aaron Lilly and Chris Stout. Alright, well, thank you for tuning in. If you have any comments to say at all, excuse my little slips of the tongue, and sorry about that. But thank you for listening to this, and let's expand the discussion, and please drop a comment below. Until next time.